Okay, so we are live now on YouTube, the new returning home for the Gestalt IT Rundown. We started here. I think this will be our home till the end of days, Tom. Whether that be, soon or slightly further down the road than soon. In a galactic sense, assuredly, it will be mere milliseconds away.
You're so fatalistic, Rich. I love that about
I,
you.
I try, it's my charm. It makes me value every second, meaningless though it may be. Our welcome to your weekly dose of nihilism. Here we go. Um, so we got a ton of cool IT news that is not at all fatalistic, nihilistic. It's realistic if we want to keep it real like that. No one wants to hear me do what I'm doing right now. I don't know what's going on. It's all the coffee, folks, and yeah. So Tom, a lot of news, a lot of market kind of news. There's some state of the industry kind of news. There's acquisitions, of course. I think we'll have that just about every show. My favorite though has to do with cloud computing, like it's 1988. So are you ready to get it rocking and, on the other hand, rolling?
Yes, to the cloud, Rich.
To the cloud. Oh my gosh, remember that?
Hmm.
Did Microsoft even have Azure when they were running that ad campaign?
No.
That's the best part. That was like Vista, like '06 maybe?
Yeah.
Was that? Or was there a Surface involved? I feel like maybe there was a Surface at one point. Someone like had a Surface. I don't know. I'm just mashing together all my 20s together into one big Microsoft ad campaign. So, all right, we're gonna get started in just a second. We'll hear some music and then we'll start running down your IT news of the week. Let's get it going. Hello, all, and welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown, your weekly look at the IT news of the week. I'm your host, Rich Stroffolino. I'm the fatalistic editor here at Gestalt IT. Joining me from across this great nation of ours, through the magic of cyberspace, is the one, the only Tom Hollingsworth. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on in this 18th week of January, Rich.
It will never end. We'll be in January for the rest of our lives, and let's get it started with I think it's a really interesting announcement coming out of Canonical. Not a lot of people maybe think about them in an enterprise sense, but they announced Box Cloud for enterprises, which can distribute Android apps using the cloud in a container environment. I believe it uses LXD, which would make sense because they're Linux. Businesses using the service will have secure apps that are independent of devices. Canonical says this is ideal for cloud gaming, enterprise workplace applications, software testing, and mobile device virtualization. Canonical is partnering with Packet to offer Andbox on-prem and on the edge, which I think is a really interesting use case. And they're using Ampere and Intel as hardware partners, so kind of covering the x86 and ARM space there. On-demand containerized Android apps is so crazy it just might work, Tom.
Yeah, if your name is Citrix. I mean, that's basically what they've done is they've replicated the Citrix model from how many years ago? Only it's hot with containers and Android. Also, Canonical, I'm sorry to say, I don't care how innovative you are, this will still not make 2020 the year of VDI.
This does seem weirdly like an idea that they started developing when they were trying to do more mobile focused OS stuff. And they're just like, I guess we could spin this out and we'll
Hmm.
just do like enterprise stuff instead of delivering apps this way. Like, I could see this being fairly compelling. This almost reminds me of what was the company? I think it was called Robin. They did a phone which was basically like all their Android apps were based in the cloud and stuff like that. It seemed
Hmm.
like it was way less sophisticated than this. Obviously this has an enterprise focus, and hey, cloud gaming's out, let's throw that out there too. An interesting move by Canonical. Why not? All right, Tom. In pun headline news, cloud hosting provider DigitalOcean announced restructuring, with the register reporting about 10% of its staff laid off. Co-founder Moisey Uretsky stated recent executive shuffling as creating competing visions within the company, something that I guess happens when you have two CEOs in 18 months. He also said the company isn't concerned about profitability for its budget hosting offerings, which I believe start still at around $5 a month for like a single core server, but admitted that the company's last profitable year was 2017, and that was the only time that the company has run at a profit. Is this a sign that competing with AWS as a smaller company can't be profitable, Tom, or just this company steadying course in this case?
It's a little bit of both. As it turns out, when you have these grand visions and they don't agree with the other grand visions that other people have, somebody's got to go. And so I say this sometimes. It's the new head of the pride coming in to kill all the cubs, kind of a thing there. But yeah, you're absolutely right. You are. I mean, you're a distant 87th in this market, which means you're still ahead of Google Cloud, but you're
Clearly.
basically kind of you're fighting for scraps. I mean, the thing with DigitalOcean is like most people that use it, they host the WordPress blogs on there, or they host like a small storefront for mom and pop. You know, I'm not looking to do this if I'm CNN. DigitalOcean is not my stop. So they are going to have to learn that they have two options. You can gamble it all and play in a very big market, or you can be comfortable with what you've got. And I think that the gamble it all in the bigger market people are the ones that are now looking for a very slow boat to their next job.
Yeah, I mean, I think DigitalOcean gets a lot of goodwill because they do offer those like crazy low, Uncle Larry's discount cloud hosting servers that you can just spin up in an instant. In a weird way, I think. There was some speculation that this was a setup for them to eventually get acquired. Uretsky kind of was on Hacker News, just talking in a comment thread, which was kind of weird, but saying that that wasn't the case. That they were planning on remaining independent, stuff like that. I do have to wonder, though. Bitnami was recently acquired by VMware, I believe. It does seem maybe a little bit like I could see another company buying someone like a DigitalOcean and using that, hey, super crazy low discount pricing, get you in, and then, oh, by the way, like Amazon does with Lightsail, all of a sudden you're using other services and it's no longer $5 a month.
Maybe, but one, DigitalOcean would have to be profitable to make that make sense, and two, that works when you own the rest of the stack, and I don't think
Yeah.
anybody does that for DigitalOcean right now.
Yeah, and essentially, I mean, I'm sure they're all running off of either Azure or AWS, right, on the back end anyway. So
Hmm.
if someone were to buy them, they're just essentially buying into handing more money to Amazon. So, speaking of Google Cloud, though, major news here, Tom. Google announced it is now supporting hosting for AS400 workloads on Google Cloud. Last fall, Google did a soft launch by providing access to IBM Power Systems servers running AIX. The offering now will let customers rent time on IBM Power and iSystems. This also goes along. Microsoft also announced that they were doing AS400 last fall as well. So, kind of Google, I guess, offering a full complement and catching up in that regard. Legacy apps get private API access to other Google Cloud resources. No surprise there. Power server partitions will get their own private IP addresses as well. Pretty much table stakes, I guess, for a cloud offering, but it's AS400, so I guess we have to state that. So, Tom, are we going to see a rash of DB2 lift and shifts to GCP?
If you hurry now, you can probably intercept the container truck carrying all the cash leaving Armonk, New York, headed to Microsoft and Google over this. Because what the hell? Seriously, AS400 workloads? I mean, when you think about it, it makes all the sense in the world. Those things were virtualized to start with,
Yeah.
para-virtualized on hardware. The irony is, of course, this is the one thing Amazon can't pick up from your location and move directly into the cloud. I feel like Google needs to give this some kind of catchy name like Avalanche, because this is, like a big thing coming, and we all know it's going to be a disaster no matter what happens. So think back about all the terms you hear about refactoring workloads. Oh, well, that's not going to work in the cloud. We have to refactor it. They're not talking about apps that run on Java. They're talking about this stuff. I know people that still have jobs because no one else knows the arcane druidic language that makes AS400s work.
Yeah, well, it's funny that one of the one of the organizations cited ZD article we pulled this from was citing trying to estimate how many AS400 workloads out there, and they do that by scraping job postings of companies desperately trying to find the last AS400 engineers that haven't retired yet, or trying to draw them out of retirement, I guess, with some hefty incentives there. So that's interesting as well. Is this an instance though of like Google was contacted by one potential customer, and they're like, "I guess we'll just make this an offering because why not?"
This is $1 million contract, and now they have to justify all the AS400s they had to buy. So they're going to figure out how to make this work. And the 13 people left in the world that still need this are probably going to be delighted. I'm sure there's an insurance company in Omaha somewhere that's running COBOL on AIX in a bunker. And they're like, finally, we can move to the cloud and give up this life of larceny.
Well, we'll have a story about IBM in a little bit. I think they'll be a little bit prepared if everybody moves to GCP running IBM AS400 workloads. Next up here, in other Google news, though, Google Cloud announced a partnership with Airtel, India's third largest telecom operator, which will offer G Suite to small and medium businesses as part of the telco service portfolio. Airtel serves over 325 million people in India, which last I checked is a lot, including 500,000 small and medium businesses. Microsoft announced a similar deal with India's largest telco, Reliance Jio, back in August. Third place telecom, third place public cloud. Big deal, Tom?
No, not really. This is just kind of picking up some dollar bills that are scattered along the ground. I don't see where this is going to benefit Google in the long run, other than saying they have some market penetration in India.
Yeah, if they had made, if this was an announcement with Reliance Jio, I mean, there is a large consumer base here, and yeah, I do think this is okay. You're going to use some productivity suite, so you're going to bundle in G Suite with whatever other services your ISP is basically offering you at this point. Uh, uh, if it had been with Reliance Jio and they had kind of inked that signature kind of a kind of deal there. I think maybe a bigger deal in terms of gaining mind share in that Indian market and using that to expand within the region. Um, again, not to say that Airtel is by any means a small operator. They are huge, gigantic, basically by any metric that you want to throw at them. They just happen to be in a country with over a billion people in it. So 325 million is third place. Um, you know, Obviously these are the deals that Google Cloud needs to make. But yeah, everyone else is making these at the same time too, unless you're Amazon, in which case you don't care because everyone's going to want to use you anyway.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, this is no Jedi deal, but for Google, this is what you have to do to keep the lights on. Because let's face it, their Google Cloud's on death watch, just like everything else is.
All right, next up, final piece of Google news, I believe, here for the show. Google announced it was updating the support offered through its Google OS automatic update program for education, now offering 8 years of updates for devices launching in 2020, up from 3 years previously. This does come at a price. Google did raise the Chrome Education Update price, a one time fee to unlock fleet management, 24/7 support, and other commercial features from $30 to $38. Is this Google trying to pad their education lead here, Tom, or are they feeling the need to maybe hit gas as competition heats up? I ask that because raising the price indicates they can raise the price, which is interesting, but it seems like they're giving a lot for not a big price increase.
But realistically speaking, was it something that they weren't already going to give anyway? I mean, look at the average age of Chromebooks that are out there now. I wonder if part of this was, hey, these things are lasting 5 and 6 years, because if you've ever worked in education, you know the idea of a 5 year replacement cycle is fairly aggressive. This is basically just validating the fact that they'll keep working. I'm wondering if this isn't maybe a push to get people to refresh the Chromebooks that are 5 years old, so that they can get some new hardware out there for their partners. I don't really see why this is. This is just basically trying to squeeze a little bit more blood out of that turnip. Education customers are always historically very reticent to part with their dollars. And so getting an extra $8 out of that Chromebook, and it's a one-time fee. It's not like it's $38 per
Yeah.
year. You pay an extra $38 with the Chromebook, which, okay, granted, is probably 10% of the price of the thing to start with. Um, and I mean, it will last you through the next two presidential administrations. Okay, sign me up. But I mean, I also don't see a big land rush of people trying to put iPads in either. So I don't necessarily know. I think Google's competing against themselves here. They're not competing against anybody else.
Yeah, it does seem weird. I mean, we did see Apple make that push for education. I think it was almost 2 years ago now, with that 9.7-inch iPad that had started to integrate pen support. Um, but for all of the quote unquote goodwill that garnered or seemed to get positive press or something like that. I mean, the 250 Chrome, $250 Chromebook again that has good enough processing and you're doing everything in the cloud anyway. It's just running a web browser. Um, it's tough to beat that even with the big silicon lead that Apple seemingly has, or with Microsoft's Windows 10 strategy. I think for even though Chrome OS is just as update heavy as Windows 10 is now, for whatever reason, I think the perception is that it's I don't even want to say more stable, but it's less it's more consistent, I guess, because it's just
Yeah.
seemingly just a web browser.
Yeah, and when you consider that the real win here has nothing to do with the operating system, because I mean, if you want to compare stability of Chrome OS to iOS, I mean, that's
Yeah.
you know that's not even a comparison. But when you look at the productivity applications, I mean, you can offer full G Suite, and now what's Apple going to offer? iWork. Nobody does anything in iWork.
Well, and I don't now. I speak out of ignorance here because I don't know if Apple does offer similar offerings like 24/7 support. I know they do have sophisticated fleet management features and stuff like that. Although a lot of that is proprietary. I'm pretty sure even if you wanted to, you can farm that out to another service. So that gets into a whole, a whole nother issue there, I guess, a larger education issue, which we don't have time. They're fascinating look at that though, and interesting to see. I think a lot of people are betting against Google because it's a Chromebook. Like no one really wants it. It's not, it's not that good. But I guess good enough as working for their education scheme. Speaking of things working, IBM, I remind you, a for profit company, saw revenue grow for the first time in 5 quarters. The company reported revenue of $21.77 billion. That was up on the year. A year ago, they had $21.76 billion in revenue. So it's up 0.04%. I guess they shook out the couch cushions. Red Hat revenue continued to grow up 24% in the year. The previous quarter, it was up 18%. So continuing to grow, which I think is really interesting, helping its cloud and cognitive software business unit grow 9% to $7.24 billion in revenue. IBM Systems revenue, mainframes, was up 16% to $2.84 billion, with Z Series revenue up 60%. They did update or release the new Z15, I think, a quarter ago. So people want that sweet mainframe action. All other business units were down on the year. Not a lot of people thought buying Red Hat was a bad move. I think, like, overall, I mean, I know a lot of people had issues with it, and there were questions about whether IBM could execute with the strategy, but it seems to be helping IBM's bottom line pretty quickly here, Tom.
Well, I mean, there was only one place to go, up, because I mean, so look at the business units that grew. You got the AI business unit, which I mean, that's like the stock market. That money doesn't exist because there's not going to be anything that comes out of AI. And then mainframes. Okay, you guys are still collecting rent on that sunk cost thing. It's like owning a house for 100 years and renting it out to people. The cost of that thing's paid off. So I mean, it hurts my heart to say this as a former IBMer, but I really don't see where they're going to go from here. I think this is going to be like, Wang computers, where they just kind of exist today and nobody knows about them. Because, I mean, yeah, Red Hat. Well, here's the thing: we don't talk about Red Hat, the IBM business. We still talk about it as if it's its own separate company. Nobody really understands that they're owned by the same, group. So I don't know what IBM is going to be able to do to build their business, because they're not going to be able to compete in cloud. Are they going to keep selling mainframes for the rest of their life? Are they going to develop, Watson 2?
They're banking on retro enterprise tech coming back into vogue. I mean, but we're still talking about people running AS400 workloads. So clearly, there is a need for that big iron approach. Whether that's whether if I'm starting a Fortune 500 company now, like I do over the weekend, certainly I'm not going to be installing a Z15, but virtually no one is in that situation of starting that up overnight. And so for a huge number of businesses, if they can squeeze all the blood from that stone for a number of years, maybe they can, maybe like you said, Watson too. Who knows? Maybe Red Hat becomes their VMware. I think a lot of people forget that, kind of in a similar, it's not as direct ownership like with Red Hat and IBM, but basically is a Dell EMC property for all intents and for financially in a lot of ways. So maybe that's enough. And when you're having double digit growth and that's growing year over year over the course of a couple of years, if they can keep that up, keep that relatively consistent, maybe that does become they become the Red Hat company, and we don't even think maybe that's the thing. Maybe it's IBM fades into the background because we're only thinking about Red Hat. I don't think they have a problem with that as long as they're making money, right?
Yeah. as long as they're making money.
Speaking of VMware, they announced they plan to buy the network analytics startup Nyansa. The plan is to integrate Nyansa's Viance analytics platform. I'm thinking of Vonage, which is confusing me. They're going to integrate their analytics platform into VMware SD-WAN by VeloCloud, meaning they get the tech field day presenter trifecta. VMware is getting some interesting pure play analytics here, but what most interests me is if they will expand in kind of this crowdsourced nature of Nyansa's platform. Like I said, they've been a tech day presenter a couple of times now, and so I've kind of gotten to get to know some of their offerings. They have a really interesting feature that lets you compare your network performance with others in similar configurations. It's kind of their approach to getting like the user experience metrics in a lot of ways. I know a lot of people like to do client side probes and sensors and that kind of stuff. This is their approach, that kind of comparing similar configurations of their customers in an anonymized way, giving you relative metrics to go along with just speeds and feeds. Is this larger data set part of a bigger trend here, Tom? I'm thinking of what HPE got with InfoSight from Nimble Storage, where they're building up that huge data set and kind of using that to build basically analytics for their customers about when things will fail or how to provision stuff and stuff like that. Will we be seeing that more often? And is that just as important as this analytics platform to VMware?
Any input into a data analytics platform is important. And what you don't look at this, well, you could look at this as the Nimble InfoSight thing, but a more direct corollary would be the Raza acquisition that became Aruba Net Insights.
Okay.
This literally, I mean, Raza was a competitor to Nyansa when they launched years ago. By the way, they did launch at Field Day. Fun story: when we signed them up, they didn't even have a company name yet. We figured it out along the way. But first of all, congratulations to our friends over there, because anytime you get acquired is always a good thing. The fact that it's going to the VeloCloud business unit does tell me that they're going to continue to do end user support, like the crowdsourced analytics. The interesting thing, I was actually seeing something that Seamus McGillicuddy posted earlier today. This is a great way to get telemetry from a user perspective. I mean, how many times have we done troubleshooting where it's like, well, it looks good on my end, well, it isn't working over here, so obviously there's a problem in the middle. The analytics engine from Nyansa, the agents and everything that run on site can collect data and say, oh, well, yeah, it looks good from your end because you're looking all the way up to the CPE. But in fact, the users are reporting horrible performance because it turns out like there's a bad connection somewhere, or somebody, triggered some kind of a lockdown QoS policy or something like that. This is great for large customers. Nyansa's bread and butter was universities. So,
Mhm.
big organizations with lots of user focused devices that are not things you own. So I can see this being a huge win for like customer analytics for things like branch offices and stuff like that. Uh, the was it Vernie, vRealize Insight Manager is the platform that this is really going to roll up into. Vernie kind of runs the data center side of things. This is the user's focus side of things. This is all about giving SD-WAN analytics a little bit of a shot in the arm. I hope it pays off. Honestly, this is the best exit that Nyansa could hope for. Not necessarily where I thought they were going to go, but Nyansa's feature set has always kind of been just that. It was a feature. It wasn't really a platform or a product. And so this is good for them. I hope that VMware builds on this. Although realistically speaking, I don't expect to see the term Nyansa or Voyance at all by this time next year. I think this is just going to get completely absorbed into the VMware Analytics engine, and just it'll be there.
Yeah, that was always the question. A lot of times when I would see their presentations, is yeah, that core capability is really interesting, but they needed to build out a whole lot of stuff to make it feasible as a standalone analytics platform. And yeah, integrating like this, I mean, if nothing else, I'll be interested to see at the next networking field day we see VMware at, to see if we get some more details about how this will be integrated and what we'll actually see from a network engineer perspective. So that will be very interesting.
Mhm.
And finally, here, our last of the day. New report from White Source shows an increasing shift in open source licensing habits, which I thought was really interesting. It found that in 2019, 33% of software in their dataset uses so-called copyleft license, like the GPL derivatives 2.0, 2.1, whatever. Uh, that allow developers to use codes freely, but require providing the same license with any newly developed versions or forks from that code. So if you take that code, you build something else, it also has to be licensed under GPL if you use that code. Meanwhile, 67% of software used permissive licenses like MIT's license or Apache 2.0, which allows users to use the code, not require derivatives to be so licensed as well. You just basically have to disclose the code that you use that was open source. You can kind of build your own code if you want to that way. Compare that to 2012, when 59% of the software in the data set was under copyleft licenses and the rest under those permissive licenses. The top 10 open source projects are now managed by Facebook, Google, and Microsoft. You may have heard of them. Is this just a reflection that open source is pervasive within the tech giants of our day, Tom?
Yeah, crowdsourcing is a great way to get some features that people want and then make people pay for them. I mean, realistically speaking, this is exactly what's happening in the market. And let's be fair, I love open source. I ran Linux back in the day when you had to compile the damn thing. So I get it. But this is the problem that you're running into is look at the reduction in the number of projects that went from using copyleft, which is basically everything we can use is freely available, to a model where we can build on this and we might even contribute some code back to you guys. But the really good stuff, no, you got to pay for that. And we're not going to license it back to you. I mean, this is in a way, it's kind of the third leg away of the stool, away from make it completely freely available or build your support model around it. I don't know how sustainable this is though, because with the situations you get into. I mean, I'm not an open source developer, so I won't be able to speak with 100% certainty on this. But if a company like Google or Amazon comes in and raids my project for a whole bunch of really cool ideas, and then immediately locks their contributions behind a license where I can't understand where they're coming from, yeah, that's going to piss me off. I mean, Amazon does it all the time with
Yeah.
databases. They take an open source database, they build it into their service offering, and then they add extensions to it, and then they charge for it. So I don't get the mind share of developers. I don't get the exposure of using my database. It frustrates me. It's like if in a networking space, it's like taking an open protocol like OSPF or ISIS and building extensions on top of it that nobody else can use. Oh wait, I know what that is. That's Trill, and that failed miserably. So yeah, stop doing that.
I do have to wonder if this is a problem of terminology or nuance or something like that. I feel like net neutrality is starting to get in a similar vein where it used to be it used to be very simple. Like you meant open source, it meant like not Microsoft proprietary code, and there is now much more nuance into what the implications of open source are, and not even to say that. Uh, that Facebook, Google, and Microsoft and the other big giant companies, there are tons of enterprise companies too. I know NetApp is like super active in their open source projects and stuff like that. Not to say that they can't theoretically be good stewards. And if you look at the top contributors, I think Microsoft is like one of the top open source contributors as well. So it isn't just because they're under these licenses doesn't mean they're automatically not contributing code to other projects and stuff like that. But at the same time, I do think simply labeling something as open source really it gives you this nice hippie feel to a lot of these projects when in actuality, like you said, they're kind of building on the shoulders of those that have come before them and then not allowing people to build on top of them, which I do think has some long-term knock-on effects. And uh we will see the open source community. I don't know if you've heard this, Tom, can be a little moody is the word I want to use, persnickety, particular, if we will. So I think if this trend continues, we may see a backlash against true open source versus more corporate, maybe open source, something like that.
And I can see that distinction being drawn very quickly. I mean, because let's face it, even in the open source community, you got advocates who are for open source, and then you look way over there in the corner and you have the GNU guys like Stallman who are like,
Yeah.
there can never be any kind of tainted code in the kernel at all, or you are not a purist. And that visibility does not really reflect reality. And there's this news story we didn't get a chance to get to last week because I think we wanted to dig into a little bit more about the
Yeah.
whole idea of putting ZFS in the kernel. And one of those persnickety developers who just happens to be named Linus was just like, not no, but hell no. And here's all the reasons why. And I'll tell you, I agree with Linus completely. You don't want to put a ticking time bomb in the kernel. totally understand. Now, I don't necessarily know that his opinions about whether or not ZFS is a totally valid file system or not matter. But look at this corporate contribution problem. What's to say that the guy who follows Satya at Microsoft doesn't come in and go, "Hey, that open source stuff is garbage. I don't believe in that license. We want to take all of our code back, and if you've used it, we can charge you." I don't see that happening because they don't have a legal leg to stand on. But the fact that you don't know kind of gives you pause.
But that doesn't stop some companies, Oracle. So the yeah, the other question though that I have is, or the other concern I have is, I hope the pendulum doesn't swing the other way when it if this ever does become more fractured in terms of, you have the open source purists, shall we say, like you said, the GNU guys like Stallman and such. Um, I hope we don't have that far of a reaction because while I respect people that want to be that principled and they want to run Linux that has absolutely no proprietary code and stuff. I'm trying to remember what the name of it was. It Slack Linux that used to be like the pure open source. It was like the punk straight edge Linux
Yeah,
distribution.
yeah.
Or no,
Slackware or Arch.
that's Blackware. Oh god, I can't think of it now. It used to have like a really punk logo, and now I can't think of it at all. Distro Watch 28 Rich, 2008 Rich is very disappointed. The but I there has to be obviously I would think a practical approach to this that isn't just okay, permissive licenses are fine across the board, stuff like that. So, an interesting issue to watch. GitHub has had some studies about this going back to 2015. Although now that they are owned by Microsoft, we will see if they are so forthcoming, maybe with that kind of licensing info. So nice to see this from White Source as well. All right, that just about does it for Gestalt IT Rundown for this week. Tom, thank you so much for being here. Where can people find more of your great stuff if they are so inclined?
Well, you can always find me over at Networking Nerd or networkingnerd.net, Networking Nerd on Twitter, of course, gestaltit.com. A lot of great writing coming out over there. Make sure you check out all the other stuff we do, including the event we have going on, techfieldday.com this week. It's about storage, so I won't be watching, but I hope you do.
Yeah, Storage Field Day going on right now. Tiger Technology just had, or Technologies had just had their debut presentation. So you might want to check that out. We will have full video of that available at techfieldday.com. Pretty soon, the wonderful Ben Gage is our video editing machine, and he'll have that up ASAP along with the rest of the presentations as soon as they are done, or as soon as possible after they are done. So check that out. And you can find me, my writing on gestaltit.com. Just want to let everyone know if you're interested in some of the links and stuff that we do here. We've had now have expanded show notes also within the blog post on Gestalt IT for the Gestalt IT Rundown. So check that out. We have links, little write ups, some hot takes, if you will. So check that out as well. If you are listening to this on our podcast feed, if you're interested in that, just search for Gestalt IT Rundown in your podcatcher of choice. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Anthropology. That's MR Anthropology. But we will be back next Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time on YouTube, running down the IT news of the week. Until then, for myself, for Tom Hollingsworth, for everyone here in the Gestalt IT family, here's wishing you and yours to have a super sparkly day.